When it comes to the research and what's being discovered about this, first thing I want to say is you must measure what matters. Okay, and one of the big findings in multiple researches is that people are often not measuring what matters. Okay, and of course the very sentence is a whole debate in its own right, because you can have the question about matters to who, matters for what do we mean by matters. But our second thing that you have to know is that what you measure will matter. Okay, it's the age-old dog wagging the tail thing. So if you go into a school, this is what quite a bit of the research shows, and you start measuring things and saying to people, this is what we want to see happening in your school, that's what the school is going to spend time doing. And often to the detriment of what they should be doing. Okay, so when it comes to monitoring and evaluating projects in schools, you've got to be extraordinarily careful that the very act of measuring what happens in a school doesn't upset the potential for development in that school. Okay. And then the most important one of all, you can't measure what matters most. Okay, and it's all about that attribution of agency. So the way I best describe this is every teacher at Sacred Heart has an iPad. I put an iPad into one teacher's hand and they say, this is fantastic. I wonder what I can do with this in my class. You put it in another teacher's hands and they say, this is fantastic. I wonder when they're going to show me what to do with this in my classroom. Okay, and that to me is the critical factor between success and failure in terms of functionality in a school. That agency issue. So let's start with this question. Quality is not something that simply happens because people are well-intentioned and work hard. Quality should be expressed in school aims and policies to promote pupil learning. Thus, it has to be set as a goal and it has to be managed. This is from the whole school evaluation document that we developed. Judith Chapman and David Aspen have grappled with the same thorny issues in quality debate, and they have adopted a pragmatic approach useful for our purposes here. Chapman and Aspen have not limited quality to any one specific meaning. Despite extensive research, they have identified a set of core values which may be said to be typical of quality schools. Listed below are some of those core values which we like to promote in our schools. This is what we were saying. Schools should be capable, democratic, and just. Now, I want to see where in your instruments you are measuring democracy in the school, where you're measuring justice in the school. Okay? Learners should have the opportunity to acquire, apply, and practice different kinds of knowledge, skills, attitudes that will prepare them for life. Again, we measure the easy things, the marks. Okay? The hard stuff, that's why I say you can't measure what matters, are the skills and attitudes. Because those are mental entities, and those are things that you have to use self-reporting to measure. Or you can observe it, but the observer changes what's being observed. Schools should actively demonstrate concern for and promote high standards of excellence in all aspects, both in an individual and at the institutional level. These are all things you've heard. We need to expose learners to a humane outlook on life and instill critical values as an integral part of each individual's personal and social development. These are quality schools we're talking about in the world. Schools should develop a learner's sense of independence and self-worth as human beings, giving them confidence in their ability to contribute, and so forth and so on. You can get this afterwards. But I want to just comment on that last thing, because what the schools find, particularly schools working with vulnerable or marginalized groups, is you can get children to get the marks to get them into university, and then they drop out. Okay? And the reason is we don't focus on what the KEP school movement talks about, grit. But what a lot of the debate at the moment is on resilience. How do we create resilience in children? How do we create? And that's the answer. So you must measure what matters. So the problem with most monitoring and evaluation is that we measure the symptom and not the cause. We measure the outward manifestation of the problem, and we try to change that. Now this comes from a fantastic book which I advise you to get hold of. It's called How to Measure Anything. and it was written in 2014. It's saying, this is how you go about creating a monitoring and evaluation tool. The first thing is, you must ask yourself the question, what decision is this measurement is supposed to support? So what is the decision we're trying to make in the school or in the project? What is the thing we're trying to affect, okay, that the measurement is supposed to support? What is the definition of the thing being measured in terms of observable consequences? Okay? How exactly does this thing matter to the decision being asked? But the question that's being asked here is, if you want to measure something that other people will tell you is immeasurable, then you start with, so you're making a decision to measure something. And you're saying, so we're going to measure something, what decision are we trying to make about our, and in your cases, many of your cases, it's going to be the decision you make as to how you plan to intervene in the school. That's the decision you're making, and that's what you've got to ask yourself about in terms of what your measurement is supposed to support. And then, what are the observable consequences of that intervention? And then you say, how exactly does it matter? How much do you know about it now? And this is quite interesting, because people go into measuring things without first figuring out what the baseline is. And what is the value of additional information? So that's the Hubbard book. So this is opposite to what you guys are talking about. What are the symptoms of a good school? Okay, there's curriculum provision. Most of you will recognize these things. Okay, there's student achievement. There's the quality of the teaching and teacher development. There's school system structures and safety, which someone was chatting about. And then there's the governance, the management. Three things that matter in a school is the curriculum, the teacher, and the learner. That's what determines the quality of teaching and learning. And of course, the one that's most neglected in that is the teacher. It's like neglecting the machine in a factory. Your teacher is the means of production in a school. You need to keep the questions you're going to ask precise and short. You need to avoid loaded terms. You need to avoid leading questions, compound questions, reverse your questions. So what you measure will matter, and that's why I start with, so how brave are you willing to be? Okay? How brave are you willing to be? So there are 4 useful measurement assumptions. First of all, your problem is not as unique as you think. That's the bridge mandate. The next thing you must know is you have more data than you think. New data is more accessible than you think. This comes from the How to Measure Anything book. Okay, now, here's the homework. I'm not going to worry about the videos right now because there's no sound. This is a very important book, and I don't think anybody involved in education today should be involved in education until you've passed the test on whether you've read this book. It's called Professional Capital. It's written by Fullen and Hargreaves in 2012. And they say, and listen carefully, when education is organized to get quick returns on business investment and to increase immediate returns by lowering that investment, it favors a teaching force that is young, flexible, temporary, inexpensive to train at the beginning, unpensioned at the end except by teachers' own self-investment, and replaceable wherever possible by technology. And that is a business focus, a business capital focus on education. Businesses want quick return because they work in quarters. Businesses work in quarters. Education works in decades. Okay? And so your measurement instrument must be expecting to get its answer 10 years from now. Thank you. Hargreaves writes a book called Sustainable Leadership, and in that book he says, the job of the principal is to make discretionary judgments in situations of manifest uncertainty, by which he means I have to make decisions about things that I have to use my judgment and my experience and my knowledge to make that, but I cannot know whether I'm making the right choice. It's manifestly uncertain. And I will only know when it's too late to do anything about it. So you are making decisions about spending money in schools, and you have no way of knowing whether that spend is actually going to bring about a positive outcome in the end. And the problem lies in the fact that teachers, this is something I heard, teachers aren't completely free. They are creatures of circumstance, products of their working environment. Today there's not just one way to teach. What it feels like to be a teacher and do the job every day varies. It depends on what you want to achieve in it, whether you're capable of meeting your own and other people's expectations, how your job is designed, what contacts and relations with colleagues are like, and what sort of conditions you work in. There's enough just in that paragraph for you to design a monitoring instrument. Okay, I know I've got a minute left. So I wanted to ask you to remember rule number 6. And I can't show you the video because we've run out of time, but the answer to this is, don't take yourself so damn seriously. Okay? And if you want to know what rule number 1 to 5 are, there are no other rules. There is only rule number 6.
Yeah, please.
I don't know if you're going to be able to hear it in here. So I'm going to just jump here quickly.
You'll post it.
Yeah, I'll post
It will be
this.
on the Bridge website.
Oh,
The presentation.
Okay, I'll send you one with the videos included.
On the Bridge website.
I always exclude the videos because they make the fun part of me. So I've got a minute left. So there's a fantastic book by McBeath called Schools Should Speak for Themselves. Okay, so the final thing I want to say is, remember that whatever you set out to measure, I want to just go back to that first slide of mine. What you measure will matter. So whatever you set out to measure, people are going to try and achieve that thing. Okay, and if the determination of the thing that's being measured is an external determination, you're going to have very little commitment to it within the school. And you're going to get lip service, and you're going to get superficial implementation, and you're going to get people saying that they're doing it or giving you excuses as to why it wasn't done. So you have to, and that's in that How to Measure Anything book. There's a really important part that before you develop anything, sit and talk to the school. The person most ignored in the educational triad is the one who's required to solve the problem. The teacher closes the door and you have absolutely no control over what